Story 1. Yes, after 8 hours of work, my day is pretty much done. I might as well work 2 more hours and have an extra day off. Story 2. I work what I believe to be the best schedule ever. I work 3 12-hour shifts overnight and then have 4 days off. This gives me almost a whole week completely to myself, allowing plenty of time to spend with my family. Sure, 12 hours is a long shift, but I can get all the work done quickly and have more time to relax during the week. It's totally worth it. I will admit that Mondays are hard. I'm exhausted and spend most of my day lying around, watching television, and napping with the dog. Story 3. I worked a 9-day, 80-hour schedule in defense, and it was great. You worked 9 hours a day and had every other Friday off. Sometimes you could also work 4 days a week for 10 hours each day. It was great because you did not feel the extra hour every day. Participating in the schedule was entirely optional. The Fridays off always felt amazing. It is the only perk from defense that I miss. Story 4. I prefer a 4-day workweek with 8-hour days, which is what the 4-day workweek is all about. We should advocate for a 32-hour week instead of longer days. Story 5. I have worked 4 10-hour shifts for 22 years. When I work close to home, it is really great. When my commute is 1.5 hours each way, it is only manageable because I only do it 4 times, and I receive a per diem of $105 a day. However, it's not as good as a 20-mile drive. This year, though, we have the option for overtime, so I can work Fridays to earn more hours or another day for additional per diem. I worked on Good Friday for double time, holiday pay, and per diem. I wonder if I will work again. Yes, I believe it is acceptable. Story 6. Absolutely. More days off are always a win in my book, and based on my experience, 10-hour shifts don't feel that much worse than 8-hour shifts. Story 7. Yes, because I want a 3-day weekend and am perfectly willing to sacrifice the other 4 days to make that happen. Story 8. I preferred a 4-day workweek because it felt like I had more freedom and time outside of work. Story 9. I work 4 10-hour days and I can't imagine going back to 5 8-hour days. I absolutely love having 3 days off and an extra 52 days a year to do what I want. Adding an extra 2 hours to your workday is easy. You get so used to it that working 8 hours feels unproductive. Story 10. The majority of people are not working for those 40 hours anyway. They are sitting in an office, chatting, gossiping, and taking breaks. Why not just reduce it to 4 days at 6 hours each, with everyone required to complete their work during that time? Then we can be compensated for the work we do, not just for the time it takes to do it. Story 11. I would prefer any opportunity. I am currently unemployed. This country lacks job prospects. I will be patient and continue my studies. Story 12. I worked in a hospital with a schedule of 3 12-hour shifts. I prefer that arrangement. My husband works 4 10-hour shifts and has the option to take Friday off if he chooses, but he usually goes in for the overtime. Story 13. I work a 9/80 schedule that gives me every other Friday off, which I like. However, I would gladly work an extra hour Monday through Thursday for every Friday I have off. Story 14. I seem to have a different perspective, but I believe a 10-hour workday completely disrupts my entire routine. There is neither time nor energy to pursue other activities. If you work from 6 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., assuming they will still deduct 30 minutes for lunch, then any time before 6 a.m. is spent getting ready and commuting to work. By the time you return home, it's nearly 5:30 p.m. You are left with about 3 hours to prepare dinner, eat, do chores, and get ready for the next workday if you want to ensure you still get 8 hours of sleep. When is there time to exercise? When can I read? When do I walk the dog? When can I indulge in activities that I enjoy? In my opinion, having an extra day off does not compensate for the disruption of 4 other days. Story 15. No. Because 410s is just the misdirection used by capitalists to continue exploiting you on productivity and taking larger portions of the profit created by workers. Story 16. Years ago, I had a job like that, and it wasn't all that bad, but I wouldn't want to do it again. If you have any kind of commute, you accomplish nothing but work on workdays. Story 17. No, because I would prefer 4 days a week of 8 hours or 5 days a week of 6 hours. Essentially, any combination that results in fewer hours is preferable. Story 18. I will work 3 days a week for 16 hours a day. I dislike having to plan around work every single day. It makes the rest of the day difficult. I would prefer to work hard for 3 consecutive days and have the remaining days entirely to myself. Story 19. Not for me. I'm an elder caregiver. 10 hours a day would be too much. One-on-one care requires longer breaks. Story 20. I had a job where I worked 10 hours a day, and I found that I did not work as efficiently that way. I would rather work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Story 21. I had that schedule for a few years and I would love to go back to it. It was truly a game changer when holidays turned into 3-day work weeks and 4-day weekends. When called for overtime, I could earn significant additional income for working 5 days a week. I would jump at the chance to have that schedule again. Story 22. I assume you are comparing the 8-hour shifts, 5 days a week, and the answer is definitely yes. The 4 10-hour schedule is a significant improvement over the 5 8-hour shifts. It provides more time to focus on personal interests. Story 23. I work 4 10-hour days and would hate to return to 5 8-hour days. I have 2 days to run errands and handle responsibilities, and a whole day to relax. Story 24. Absolutely. I have done it in the past. The issue lies with the type of work you do or what your company does. My current company needs to be open for service 5 days a week and even some weekends. This makes it harder to staff the full calendar. Story 25. As long as it was guaranteed 4 10-hour days instead of 4 10s, then 8 hours on Friday and 8 hours on Saturday that we worked. This was better than 7 8s, but only barely. Story 26. I currently work about 41 hours over 5 days, but I cannot attend concerts, which is my main hobby, on any of those days. The concerts start between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m., and I usually finish work at 9 p.m. I would prefer to have an extra free day for concerts, reducing my working days to 4. Story 27. The best shift is the one I am currently on, 3 12-hour weekend days. Sure, you lose your weekend, but 4 days off is hard to beat. Take 3 days off with paid time off and get almost 2 weeks off. It is the most productive shift of all, and everyone is happier as a whole. It's a win-win. Story 28. Absolutely not. This is my least favorite shift. I currently work 5 8-hour shifts per week, but I would prefer to do 3 12-hour shifts easily before I did 4 10-hour shifts again. With the 12-hour shifts, I felt rejuvenated and had 3 days off. With the 10-hour shifts, I became exhausted, and 1 day off was not enough. Story 29. I work 4 10-hour workdays, and I would not be happy if I had to go back to 8-hour shifts. I enjoy having 3-day weekends. Story 30. I currently work this schedule. It's not too bad. I really enjoy having 3 days off. I wouldn't mind doing 3 12-hour shifts either because those 3 days fly by. Story 31. I used to work this schedule many years ago, and I absolutely loved it. I always had Friday to Sunday off, and I worked in an office where I conducted financial crime investigations while listening to music and podcasts all day. I miss that, and I could totally do it today in my current job in information technology. Story 32. Yes, 2 days is not enough, and I often work close to 9 hours. So what's 1 more hour to earn a 3-day weekend? Story 33. If it was logistically possible given the challenge of managing kids, then yes. But right now, it isn't feasible. My workplace attempted this 5 years ago, but a certain pandemic eliminated that opportunity. If I had the choice, I would pick Wednesday with no more than 2 consecutive days. Story 34. Yes, I already do that. It's good because it allows me to complete important tasks on Fridays without using my paid time off, such as going to the registry of motor vehicles or seeing a doctor or specialist. Story 35. I work 1 48-hour shift per week and really enjoy having so much time off. I would definitely prefer 4 10-hour shifts to 5 8-hour shifts, but I wouldn't want to switch to either. Story 36. I absolutely love having an extra day off. 3 days off a week is awesome, and during a long weekend, I only have to work 3 days, which is even better. However, this schedule may not work well for those with young children. Story 37. I worked both 4 10-hour days and 3 12-hour shifts at various times. Initially, adjusting to longer hours was kind of hard for me, but I got used to it. Personally, I ended up preferring the 4 10-hour days as a better compromise compared to the 3 12-hour shifts. Story 38. I already work 5 to 10 hours. Friday is all overtime, so I can't afford to take off one day. I used to work a rotating shift of 36 to 48 hours, 4 weeks of days followed by 4 weeks of nights. I did that for 17 years and grew to dislike it. Now that I'm on 5 to 10 hours, I miss having 15 days off every month in the rotating shift. But it's too late to go back, so it is what it is. Story 39. How about 4 days a week with a 20% pay increase? I dislike the thought of spending half my life at work, but starting at 9 and finishing at 7 would definitely harm my mental well-being in the long run. Story 40. Get a salaried corporate job, and I promise you will work an actual 20 to 30 hours per week and still get paid for 40. Yes, sometimes you will have to ramp up, but it is literally the easiest money you can make. Story 41. Yes, because then I get a longer weekend and that's one less day I have to use the car, meaning less money spent on fuel. Story 42. Knowing what I know now at my job, I wish I had chosen the 4-day workweek. I like my job, but having Fridays off every week would be amazing. Additionally, having regulated holidays on Fridays means I also get Thursdays off. Story 43. I have and I do. A longer day is not a big deal compared to how nice that third day off is. I love it. Story 44. Been doing this since 2008. The greatest shift, in my opinion. I haven't worked a Monday in more than a decade and a half. Story 45. Not for me. The commute to work isn't too bad, and the return home has empty streets due to the late hours. I do laboratory work that involves repetitive motions with tools in both hands and looking at a computer screen, so I face the worst of both worlds. 10 hours would be too much. Additionally, I receive a $20 bonus per shift due to the nature of the work, so I would lose that. Story 46. I have worked various schedules. From 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. for 4 days a week on a rotating team schedule with 5 consecutive days off every third week. From 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. From 6 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. From 6 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday through Thursday. Anytime before 8 a.m. until work concludes for the day. 5 to 6 days a week. Currently, I typically work from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, although sometimes it extends to 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. for 6 to 7 days a week for a few weeks at a time. One thing I have learned is that I would prefer not to work. Story 47. I worked the schedule, off Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday, for about 6 months at my last job and would love to do it again. I used Wednesdays for most appointments and errands, giving me almost the entire weekend to myself guilt-free, in exchange for arriving an hour earlier and leaving an hour later, which I hardly noticed. Story 48. I might be an outlier, but in my high cost of living area, I work a full-time job from Monday to Friday and fill in with gig work for another 10 hours a week. I like having a routine, and realistically working 5 to 8 hours every day is something that works for me at this point in my life. Rather than taking full days off, I work while my significant other is sleeping or working, which gives us more time together. At this point, I am very happy with my schedule and wouldn't change it right now. Story 49. I used to work 4 10-hour days and I loved it. I had a bonus day to do whatever I wanted, and the 10-hour shifts didn't feel that bad to me, as I was working remotely for a technology company. I gave it up when I had kids because I couldn't work that late in the day when little ones go to bed early. I'm at a new company now, so I doubt I'll ever be able to get that schedule back. But I've always hoped I could do it again when the kids are older. It was the best. Story 50. I worked 10.5-hour days for 4 days and then had 3 days off, and I am completely burnt out. However, I am also neurodivergent and have several health issues that may have made it more difficult for me. Story 51. I worked for 6 years at my previous job and loved it. Now I work in healthcare and have 9 consecutive working days, which isn't enjoyable at all. I wish I could go back to working 10-hour shifts. Story 52. I do not understand how you all work shifts. I work from home whenever I want and set my own hours. I can take off any day I choose. Why would I want to be stuck doing the same thing every day without the option to change it whenever I like? It seems completely unusual to me. Story 53. I have done this before, and 4 10-hour shifts are far superior to 5 8-hour shifts. As far as feeling more tired on a workday, you get used to it. Every weekend is a 3-day weekend for rest and spending time with your family. If you want to take a 9-day vacation, you only need to use 4 vacation days instead of 5. Story 54. Did 4 12-hour shifts and then 3 12-hour shifts every 2 weeks. It was nice having a 4-day weekend, but I had no time to do anything on workdays. Story 55. Please, I would love it. The weekend isn't restful with 2 children at home. It's just more work. 1 day to myself would be wonderful. Story 56. I work 2 12-hour days, then I'm off for 24 hours and do 2 12-hour night shifts. After that, I get 4 days off. It makes for strange days because I used to look forward to weekends. Now, I never really know what day of the week it is. Story 57. This person worked a factory job in college, and initially they worked 5 days for 8 hours each day. However, partway through, they transitioned to 4 days for 10 hours a day, and everyone preferred that arrangement. Story 58. I alternated between 4 10-hour day shifts and 3 12-hour grave shifts, and I liked them both. With the 10-hour shifts, it didn't feel much longer, especially since I was starting at 5 a.m. The extra day off was great. I could do shopping, chores, or appointments in the evening during the weekdays and still feel like I had a full weekend to relax, be social, and go camping, etc. The 12-hour shifts felt similar. I could sleep in on the first day, but by the time I woke up in the afternoon, I still had most of the day plus some, since I was following a night schedule. It was an active job, so falling asleep wasn't really possible. However, I think if it wasn't so strenuous, it would be tough doing the long grave shifts. Now, I have a new job where I work closer to 5 9 to 10-hour shifts. The overtime pay is nice, but it affects my weekends, leaving me feeling drained. Story 59. If I had 3 consecutive days off, I would definitely take them. I almost had this at my current job, but I wasn't guaranteed consecutive days off. Having consecutive days off means plenty of time for personal activities and rest. Story 60. I have worked 4 10-hour shifts before and I much preferred it. I was more productive and I always had a 3-day weekend. If a holiday fell on a Friday, I got the following Monday off, which gave me a 4-day weekend as well. I missed that schedule. Story 61. I work in the construction service industry. If we agreed to a 4 10-hour work week, the clients would pay for the additional day or 2 to expedite the schedule. Story 62. I used to work 4 10-hour shifts back in the day. It was certainly preferable to 5 10-hour shifts, especially when mandatory overtime occurred. It was exhausting during my work week, but the days off were nice. It made me not want to return. I believe the Nordic countries have it right, working 36 hours a week with a 40-hour pay period. How much real work do you actually accomplish in a 40-hour week anyway? Story 63. I will follow the schedule my friends had when he is on at 10 a.m. during daylight saving time. He works Monday and Tuesday, is off Wednesday, and works Thursday and Friday. Story 64. I worked various types of hours. Here is a little bit from my experience. 12-hour shifts. I worked 3 days for 36 hours a week and had 4 days off. It was nice having all that free time. Sure, the 12-hour shifts weren't great. By the last hour, I was mentally exhausted and couldn't wait to clock out. But the 4 days off were worth the trade-off, in my opinion. 10-hour shifts. Probably the most ideal for me. Unlike 12-hour shifts, 10-hour shifts didn't feel as exhausting. Getting 3 days off was just as good. I had Saturday, Sunday, and Monday off. I spent the weekend doing chores, spending time with family, or hanging out with friends. When Monday came around, it was a day to myself since my family and friends went back to work. It was my day to de-stress, read, play games, and do whatever I wanted. 8-hour shifts. Probably my least favorite. I only had 2 days off, And one of those days didn't even feel like a real day off because I worked after that second day. The week felt much longer with a lot less free time. The workday definitely went by much faster than the others. Story 65. It depends on your commute duration and how you utilize your free time. If you are just sitting around, a schedule of 4 days a week with 10-hour shifts may be more beneficial, as it provides 2 additional hours of leisure on 4 out of 7 days. The challenge with 10 or 12-hour workdays is that they consume nearly all of your leisure time, leading to a cycle of sleep, work, and minimal social interaction. However, if you take advantage of an extra day off for activities and have a long commute, a 4-day, 10-hour schedule might be the best option. Story 66. Currently working 4 10-hour shifts. It isn't bad working the second shift overnight. Overtime can be challenging, as it often means sleeping away an entire day unless you manage to take a nap. Story 67. 4 10s is the best schedule. There is still enough time to fix your car and wash yourself. This includes the addition of knocking off Friday every week. When I break down the cost of my schedule change, it took $9 per hour to make me switch from 4 10s to 5 8s. Story 68. I have worked 4 10-hour shifts. It has its pros and cons. Personally, I found that the inability to do anything meaningful with my evenings made the extra day off not worth it. However, I didn't dislike it. 3 days off is certainly nice, although I didn't have all of mine in a row. Story 69. I have an extra day off. I already work more than 8 hours a day within that time frame, which gives me more free time. My daily report requirements would decrease by 20 to 25%, depending on the calculations. Story 70. I like 9-hour days from Monday to Thursday, with every other Friday off. Additionally, the Friday you work is only an 8-hour day, which helps accumulate time off quickly. Story 71. I have worked many versions of 8-hour, 10-hour, and 12-hour shifts in my career. Having a 3-day weekend every week is an incredible benefit when working 4 10-hour shifts. Story 72. I work 5 days a week and put in 6 to 10 hours, depending on the situation. I take 2 days off. Sometimes travel overlaps on Sunday evenings, and rarely on Saturday mornings, but that is very infrequent. Let's keep it straightforward. This type of schedule is acceptable to most of us, myself included. I am certain there are additional ways we can direct our collective energy to make improvements. Story 73. I work 10.5 hours during the week, from 5:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., and 6 hours on Saturday, from 6 a.m. to noon. I will turn 38 in a week, and I would ask for nothing less. I am on my feet all day. I would take more hours if they offered them to me. Story 74. 3 12-hour shifts are best, but definitely 4 days a week. You can get so much more done with an extra day. They have been trialing it in different companies and countries because it is seen to have a significant positive impact. I'm all for it. The longer day isn't going to make much of a negative difference for me. I would say overall we need to shift to 4-day work weeks, but wages need to remain the same as the 5-day work week if we go with fewer hours. It is an adjustment that is better for the people. Companies can afford not to make billions. Story 75. I come from the power utility industry. We work a 4 10-hour shift schedule when things are slow, providing a good work-life balance. We can earn significant income during outages, and during storms, we often work an initial 40-hour shift followed by 16 to 18 hours a day until power is restored. I prefer to work 4 10s most of the year, enjoy 3-day weekends, and accumulate most of my overtime in just a few weeks. Story 76. Yes, I have done it before and it is great. You can get your weekly hours and 3 days off. The company achieves its full production without any losses. Story 77. I work 8 9s and an 8, so I get every second Friday off. I haven't done both, but I prefer 4 10s more. Story 78. I work 4 10s in an office setting at an architecture firm with Fridays off. I enjoy it a lot because of the extended weekends, and the longer workday allows me to commute before and after rush hour, avoiding the worst of it. Fridays are for chores and errands, and the weekend is otherwise free. I worked 9 9s before this, which involved every other Friday off, and the switch to 10s was tough but took less than a month to acclimate. I don't know if I could ever go back to 2-day weekends. Story 79. That is my work schedule. I had the option of 12-hour shifts 3 times per week or 4 10-hour shifts. I live an hour away from work, so I chose the 10-hour shifts to avoid driving while exhausted and to keep my evenings free. If I lived closer, I would have chosen the 3 12-hour shifts. I enjoy having 3 days off per week, and 10 hours does not feel much different from 8 when you are busy at work. Story 80. I work a pitman schedule and it is awesome. Previously, I worked 8-hour shifts, and the extra time along with every other weekend off is fantastic for my work-life balance. Story 81. I already work overnight shifts from Sunday night to Thursday morning. 2 extra hours a day to earn an entire extra day off sounds appealing. I enjoy my 3-day weekends. When I worked in dispatch, the shifts were 3 12-hour periods overnight, but those shifts were on the weekend, and I was not compensated for the full 40 hours. I wasn't a fan of that arrangement. Story 82. I worked from Monday to Thursday and had Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off for years. It was the best schedule I've ever had. Story 83. Many people are already working over 10 hours a day. Some countries have proven the effectiveness of 4-day workweeks. I would be willing to accept 10-hour days with a 4-day workweek if it meant we could regain our living wages in the United States. The minimum wage was originally intended to be a living wage, but unfortunately, some individuals argue that $15 to $20 an hour is too much because that is what they have earned after working for decades. They either fail to notice that they are being severely underpaid or have developed a mindset of acceptance toward their situation. To maintain a sense of pride, they seek to see someone in a worse position so they do not feel as bad when they see their boss giving themselves a raise and reducing their paychecks again. Moreover, the lack of a living wage and constant work is part of why individuals feel they do not have time to engage in serious relationships, buy homes, or start families. I recall a CEO in the past who cut his own pay and provided all his employees with livable wages. Not only did his employees become more productive because they could finally live their lives, but they also began getting married, buying homes, having children, and taking nice vacations. Furthermore, his company's profits nearly tripled after other large corporations suggested he would bankrupt his business with the go woke, go broke rhetoric. It is simply a proven fact that happy people are more productive and contribute positively to the overall economy. Story 84. I work in an industry where, while it is technically feasible for me to be available only 4 days a week, it is not a realistic solution. Many people may encounter this situation, regardless of whether being available counts as working. What I would prefer for myself and others in a similar position is a greater level of paid time off and vacation compensation for this specific issue. This is probably the weakest part of my benefits at work, and I have a good situation overall. Story 85. I would appreciate that, as it would reduce both the number of days and hours I currently work. Story 86. I currently work the schedule and it is great. Having every Monday off is incredible. Having every Friday off would be even better. I have also worked alternating 3 days on and 4 days off, then 4 days on and 3 days off with 12-hour shifts. That was also great. Working 5 8-hour days is the worst. Everyone here says that fewer hours like a 4-day, 8-hour schedule is incredible, but that is highly unrealistic given most of our wages. Story 87. I currently work 3 12-hour shifts followed by 3 days off, then 4 12-hour shifts followed by 4 days off. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I still love it. Every weekend is a long weekend. Story 88. This is my new schedule and it is great. My day off is on Wednesday with weekends always off. I never work more than 2 days in a row. Story 89. I would prefer working 4 days a week for 6 hours a day. Perhaps someday. They have received all they will get from me. Story 90. Absolutely. I work 15 to 18 hours a day, 5 days a week, and I didn't realize how much it was affecting me mentally and physically until they stopped making movies a couple of years ago. I got happier and healthier almost immediately. Working 10 hours a day would make me feel like I was leaving right after I arrived. Story 91. Why do we need to work 40 hours a week? Can someone remind me when the habit of eating whatever is on our plate instead of stopping when we are full became ingrained in labor trends? We are significantly more productive than we used to be when 40-hour weeks became the standard, yet we still work the same number of hours. We have not benefited at all from this increased productivity if we cannot reap the rewards, while only the shareholders gain from it. Story 92. Why not 4 days a week, 8 hours a day? I worked at a company that trialed it for 16 weeks, 2 summers in a row, offering every Friday off. Our internal research found no drop in productivity. In fact, there was a small average gain. The company made more money, and employee happiness increased. Guess why we got rid of it despite the success? Shareholders complained, and the founders claimed that if China works 6 days a week, we should be grateful to work 5. Story 93. I work 10 to 14 hours a day, and my week is 40 hours. I work 3 to 4 days a week, which suits me well. With a flexible work schedule, I can start whenever as long as the 40-hour requirement is met. I could spread it over 6 days, but I am fine with my current situation. Story 94. I recently switched to a 4 out of 10 work schedule. I didn't want to, but my wife moved to the same schedule and encouraged me to do so. I thought I would dislike it, but I absolutely love it. The workdays don't feel noticeably longer, and I feel more productive. The 3-day weekends allow me to disconnect from work and have a more fulfilling life. I can take a vacation without needing to take time off work. I have an extra day to complete home projects. In summary, it is wonderful. Anyone who has the option to work 4 days a week should consider it. Story 95. This is what I am doing now, and it is amazing. My quality of life is noticeably better, and I have much more time for activities. Story 96. After 8 hours, working 2 more hours isn't a big deal since you didn't accomplish everything you could in your day because you were at work. 3 full days of rest is motivating enough to prevent entering a depressive cycle or burnout. Story 97. I did something similar when I worked on an oil rig, where we worked for 3 weeks and then had 1 week off. It has its benefits, such as the opportunity to travel extensively. However, if you have responsibilities like family or pets that need you to be present for tasks like picking them up from school or taking them to the park, it may not be a good fit. Additionally, it can make your love life more challenging since you are often absent for special occasions. Story 98. I work 5 days a week, and the hours this week are 12, 14, 14, 10, and 10. I would take either of these options. Story 99. I never work 8 hours a day. I might as well add 2 hours of extra relaxation time at the end to enjoy a long weekend. I complete all my tasks in 2 hours a day, so it doesn't matter. Story 100. The first 3 months of 4 10-hour workdays involve sacrificing the off Friday to rest and combat burnout. Additionally, if you need to do anything outside of work and commuting on those 10-hour days, the schedule falls apart. The 9/8 schedule is the superior option. It allows flexibility for tasks such as picking up kids from school while still providing every other Friday off for trips. Story 101. This is exactly what I work now, from 6 a.m. to 4:15 p.m., with a 15-minute break at 10 a.m. and a half-hour lunch at 1 p.m., Monday to Thursday. It is the best thing I have experienced in my working life. I have already turned down 2 job offers with a decent pay raise to stay here. Story 102. Yes, please get away from me. For 10-hour days is great, but when I finish work on Thursday at midnight, please do not tell me and my coworkers that something has come up and that we need to arrive at work on Friday at 6 a.m. Story 103. Yes, on my first day off, I slept because I was exhausted and worn out. The next day, I did house chores. On my 3rd day off, I enjoyed doing something fun. Story 104. I miss when I worked 3 days and 12-hour shifts. Since you are already dedicating that day to work, why not work more hours and have an entire day off? Story 105. I worked 4 10s and it was great. I had a 3-day weekend every week and used far less vacation time. The only downside was that if work was slow, the day felt long. Otherwise, I loved it. Story 106. I spend most of my day lying around, watching Netflix and napping with the dog. That sounds like a pretty nice day. Story 107. 4-day work week, same hours. That is what I want at this point. I mentally feel done after 6 hours anyway. Today it was only 5. We simply work too much for the technology we have now. Story 108. I am a registered nurse. I work 4 days with 12-hour shifts, overnight from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. It's miserable. Thankfully, I am single and have no children. However, as soon as I find a wife, I will move on. I have no social life. I sleep all day on my first day off and I spend the last 2 days in bed. My sleep schedule is completely opposite, so my parents dislike that I'm never really present. I love my job. It's the only reason I'm still here. But I plan to love my wife more, so I will be leaving the hospital as soon as possible. Respect to all the registered nurses who manage this with a full family. I would go back to a Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 job in a heartbeat. Story 109. The interesting aspect is that you wouldn't need to work an extra 2 hours per day to maintain the same level of productivity. Multiple studies show that nearly the same amount of work is accomplished in 4 regular days as in 5. Story 110. I worked this pattern for 6 years. Monday and Tuesday were working days, with Wednesday off, followed by Thursday and Friday as working days and weekends off. It was glorious. Never more than 2 days without a day off. I would rate it 5 out of 7. Story 111. This is what I do at my job, and I enjoy it. We switched about 3 years ago, and at first I wasn't too sure about it, but now I love it. I get 3 days off in a row, which is fantastic. It would be difficult for me to return to working 5-day weeks. Story 112. I used to work a 4-on 4-off shift, 12 hours at a time. I loved it. I had some weekdays off to take care of tasks, and I had weekends off to spend time with friends. I booked 4 days off to enjoy the best part of 2 weeks of holiday. Once you're at work, there's not much difference between 8 and 12 hours, especially if your commute is outside of rush hour. Story 113. The ideal duration for mentally demanding work is around 4 hours, followed by a 1-hour lunch and then 2 additional hours. This approach helps to prevent burnout. However, investors often seem to prefer less satisfied workers. Story 114. I work 12-hour shifts and will not return to 8-hour shifts. Yes, they are long days, but the extra days off are worth it. We follow a 28-day rotation where every other weekend is a 3-day weekend, meaning you only work 14 of the 28 days. You can take 2 days of vacation and be off for a week. I absolutely love it. Story 115. I worked alongside someone who did this. It was great for her until she became ill and had to manage 10-hour days. Story 116. I worked normal hours, 4 days on and 4 days off, and it was great, especially for taking a holiday. Take 4 days of holiday and you've got 12. Story 117. That is what I do now. It should be 8.5 hours per day, but due to the nature of the work, I cannot. I do, however, get time off in lieu. I do not want to return to working 5 days a week. Story 118. I work an average of 11 hours per day, but it is 5 days of work followed by 5 days off, then 4 days of work and 4 days off and so on. Depending on the schedule, I regularly get a full week off without using any of my paid vacation days. With those days, I can easily take 2 or 3 weeks off several times a year. Essentially, I have half the month off while working full-time and getting paid. It is amazing to be able to afford multiple 2 to 3-day vacation trips around the country each month, both financially and in terms of time, while still having plenty of days off to relax at home. Of course, the days can be long when I work, but on a workday I wouldn't do much else anyway, such as meeting friends, going out, or doing anything special. I am glad I have nice colleagues and a job that is not physically demanding. It gets stressful at times, but on some days I have little to no work at all and plenty of time to relax, watch a movie, play games on my phone or laptop, or pursue other hobbies. I wouldn't want to do anything else right now. Story 119. It is nearly impossible to perform like this in software development. My day is full of difficult decisions and meetings with people, and it keeps becoming faster with artificial intelligence. I am just trying to build something else that can provide me with more freedom. Story 120. I don't mind the 10 hours if I can have Friday off. I can go on a city break on Thursday night. Story 121. No, it makes no sense to have fewer working days with fewer working hours. It is useless if those hours are redistributed to other days. They pay you the same amount with fewer days and hours, and the goal is to create a healthier, happier, and more effective employee. Story 122. I work 4 10-hour shifts weekly, but I would prefer 5 8-hour shifts. My work hours and commute are too long for me to go to the gym on the same day. Story 123. As a foreman, I've tried different scheduling options with varying results. I appreciate 4 10-hour shifts, and most of my team does too, in theory. However, I find that half the time, they are mentally checked out and not fully engaged after about 7 hours, similar to how they would be with an 8-hour shift. I always let my team know that if we're going to try it, I need a full effort for about 8.5 hours to make it worthwhile, as we need to complete 5 days of work in 4. I remind them of the benefit of a 3-day weekend and encourage them to keep pushing. I have approximately a 75% success rate with 4 10-hour shifts if I mentally prepare them beforehand. In my earlier days, it was mostly unsuccessful because people would mentally check out. Story 124. I have worked that schedule at my job a few times and I like it. That extra day is always nice. I especially appreciate it because the day off can be whatever I want, which is convenient for appointments and the 4-hour waiting windows for service providers to show up. Story 125. If you gave me the option to choose between 4 shifts of 8 hours and 5 shifts of 6.5 hours, I would choose 4 shifts of 8 hours. However, 8 hours is the point where I can still do something with my day that is not necessary for living. After 10 hours, I would just have to eat, do some chores, and go to bed again. This means that at 10 hours, I would be living only to work, which is a deal I wouldn't accept. Story 126. I had this benefit at an old job for summer Fridays. Days off were nice, but your workdays can be very long. It's challenging if you have a long commute. Story 127. I work 4 days on and 4 days off for 12-hour shifts. It is not terrible once you adjust. Fortunately, my work is not too demanding. I spend maybe 4 to 5 hours on actual labor at worst, and the rest of the time is spent at a desk. I am scheduled for overtime fairly regularly, so I do not always get my full 4 days off. When I do, it is very nice. The biggest downside is having to alternate working weekends every other month, which often causes me to miss social events. Story 128. It depends on the job. 10 hours of standing or moving things will definitely bring me to total exhaustion, but 10 hours in front of a computer I can manage. Story 129. 4-hour, 8-hour days. All this technological development needs to count for something. We are encountering the next revolution, similar to the Industrial Revolution at the turn of the 19th century. It is time to rethink the labor system in our country. Story 130. I do this now to avoid an extra long commute each week. The commute and unpaid lunch destroy any sense of an evening on workdays. I grab a bite to eat, take a shower, and then go to bed. Story 131. Yes, I currently work 4 to 10 hours a day, and that 3-day weekend is very much needed. When I was younger, I convinced the construction crew I was with to work 13 hours for 3 days and 14 hours for 1 day. If you can handle it, it is honestly the best way to go about it. One of the other guys and I would get a cheap hotel nearby, as the job was about 1 hour from our city. We would stay those days and head back after the 14th hour to enjoy our 4-day weekend. Story 132. Sure, I'd appreciate the freedom of an extra day off. I have worked many 10-hour days. They are more exhausting than an 8-hour day, but that extra time off more than makes up for it. Story 133. This is what they call the 410 schedule. I have worked with a few people who had these schedules, usually having Friday or Monday off. Personally, I would not choose this option. Even if traffic is lighter at both ends, I enjoy having that extra hour for a nap each day. Story 134. I already work approximately 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. 5 days a week and take calls before and after. Having 3 days off every week would be great, but my commute is over an hour each way by train. The issue is that work doesn't just occur from Monday to Thursday. Events almost always happen over the weekend, making it impractical to have a universal third day off. Perhaps if people could rotate their days off, it might work, but most individuals are not requesting Tuesdays off. Story 135. I work 4 days per week at 0.9 full-time equivalent. I work 2 days from home for 9 hours and 15 minutes and 2 days in the office for 8 hours and 30 minutes. I love it. I don't mind putting in extra time on the work from home days because I'm not commuting, and the 2 office days get me out of the house. Then I have a 3-day weekend. It's totally worth the 10% gross pay cut for me. My daughter is just about to turn 2, and I want to spend as much time with her as possible. Story 136. Yes, there is not much of a difference between 8 and 10 hours. However, that extra day does make a difference. Story 137. I work a 4-day, 10-hour shift schedule. Monday to Thursday, then the following week Tuesday to Friday. I get a 4-day weekend every other week. I also like it because if I want to work overtime, it's on a weekday and not on Saturday or Sunday. Story 138. That's my current schedule. I love it. I work Monday through Thursday and have off on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I accomplish so much on Friday that I can relax and enjoy my weekend. If work gets busy, I will work on Fridays and still have a 2-day weekend. Story 139. I currently work a 9/80 schedule, which means I work 9 hours a day and get every other Friday off. I would be willing to work 10 hours a day for the benefit of having all Fridays off. Story 140. Yes, I used to have this type of schedule and it was wonderful. I worked Wednesday to Saturday. Eventually, I was promoted out of that role, but even 6 years later, I still think it was the best position I held in the company. Story 141. What is the point of reducing the number of working days if you will add more hours per workday? Story 142. No, it's either 4 out of 32 or nothing. Average individuals struggle to be productive in highly creative fields beyond 8 hours. Story 143. I like my schedule. 21 days on and 21 days off. Most workdays are 4 hours on and 4 hours off, with some being 6 hours on and 6 hours off, but I get paid for 12 hours regardless. While this means I'm not home for those 21 days, 50% of my time is mine to do whatever I please. I don't think about work for 20 of those off days. Additionally, I have minimal expenses when I'm at work, and we eat well. The 6-figure salary is a plus too. Story 144. I work in the mental health industry. I can probably manage if those 2 hours are used for administrative tasks or being on standby. Otherwise, I would likely struggle. Story 145. Yes, I do. It's perfect. I'm up anyway, so that's fine. I have a full day in the week to do as I wish. Chores, relax, or whatever. Story 146. My husband has been following this schedule for years now and, overall, likes it. However, he is in a leadership role at his company and, in my opinion, is called in too many times on his supposed days off, which completely negates the benefit. That said, I had a friend who worked 12-hour days with the following schedule. 2 days on, 2 days off, 4 days on, 4 days off, 7 days on, 7 days off. He mentioned that the 7 days on with the 12-hour days was tough, but having the 7 days off felt like getting multiple vacations per year. He loved it. He eventually changed to a job with a more standard schedule after his second child was born, as it was becoming too much for his wife to have him away for so long. However, he always missed that schedule. Story 147. They implemented this practice in Europe, and employees are reporting greater happiness and reduced stress. Additionally, production has increased. Story 148. My aunt works for a company where a 4-day workweek of 10 hours per day is the only option available. She interviews and hires as part of her job duties. She mentioned that almost every person expresses excitement about the work hours, stating that it is one of the main attractions of the position. However, during exit interviews, the most frequently mentioned reason for leaving was that employees did not realize how challenging the work hours would be and how negatively it affected their lives. She now discusses this with new hires. Story 149. I currently work 4 10-hour days, which means I have a 3-day weekend every week. It is the best thing ever. Story 150. I worked 4 10-hour shifts with an hour commute each way, and it was exhausting. There was no time for life outside of work, eating, or sleeping on those working days, and the weekend was spent catching up on everything. Story 151. Absolutely. I would work that shift. I once worked for a company that offered that schedule only to employees with children, providing them an extra day for doctor's appointments and school functions. It was the company's way of avoiding giving extra sick or personal days. That shift was in high demand. People would compete for it, and it always bothered me that it wasn't used on a larger scale. If working an extra 2 hours a day means getting a 3-day weekend every week, I'm willing to make that trade. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.